on certainly previous years, specific in the reputation area. Just by way of background, my PhD is in this space, so it's my pet, and forgive me if I'm overly passionate about it. But in our company, the 5Rs Partnership, which I'm the founder and principal of, and supported by a team of consultants led by Ray Davis, who many of you will know here in Southeast Asia, who was chairman of Fabisia and previously Director of Global Accreditation for CIS for many years. We're working in two spaces, and I want to say this because I think one of the things that I hope has attracted you to today's session is that reputation is an overarching concept that we work in what we call strategic enhancement of schools, all the strategic issues, but also in the operational education elements. And so reputation as a concept covers both. And there aren't many concepts that do that. And so when we talk about reputation in schools, and I'm sure Ed would relate to this from his own experiences ahead, we're talking about not only the talk, if you like, the espoused identity and name and acclaim of the school, but looking to match that and align that with what the school actually does. And that's I guess, one of the attractions about reputation in any time, but particularly now where schools are under greater scrutiny. They've been opened and, I'm going to say, exposed to the coalface of pedagogy over the last 12 months in a way that they've never been. And hasn't that been a great and interesting experience for all of us, where parents can ask questions and see what actually we've been talking about all these years in terms of pedagogy, curriculum, contemporary practice, and so forth. So in that context, I'm going to take you through the concept of reputation in 4 areas today. One is why it matters, and that might sound like the obvious, but I want to highlight that the management of reputation is really the important word here, that reputation exists in all schools and we're conscious of it, and we talk about word of mouth, but a plan or an approach or a strategy to improve reputation in a dedicated, concerted way tends to be subliminal, and it tends to be something that we just assume is captured in other planning exercises such as strategic plan. The fact is, it's not often the case that reputation improvements come out of our planning process. So we need to rethink the planning process. We also need to rethink what is involved in actually managing a reputation rather than being a reputation taker. I'd like schools to be a reputation maker. And there's a big difference between those two. I'll then talk about how to build and manage reputation in schools. One thing to announce its eminence, but another thing to say, what are the tools and what are the disciplines out there, and I guess the concepts that we can look at to fast track the building and the management of reputation. There really isn't much professional development in this space, and perhaps that's another reason people have been attracted to it. You know, for all the talk about reputation, if you want to go and do a Bachelor of Reputation or a Master's in Reputation Management, you'll be looking a long way. It's just a topic that doesn't get a clean Guernsey in that sense. And so I've been working in the space for 15 years, just for curiosity purposes. There was a professor at Manchester University in the UK that did used to run a master's in this area, and I got very close to his work when I was doing my PhD work. In any case, it's still, if you go to the library and look for a book on managing reputation, even in the corporate sector, but in schools, it's pretty thin reading. I'll then talk about areas where reputation really is becoming, I think, very significant in a COVID world in particular. For example, around parent choice and strategic planning. Now, most of you would be familiar with strategic planning and marketing planning, but I've been pretty well inundated in the last 6 months from schools wanting to rethink in this space and say, well, we've got a school that was traveling along okay, but we've really hit a bit of an iceberg in the last 12 months in terms of parent psychology has shifted, expectations have shifted, the context has shifted, obviously the macro environment has shifted. So is our strategic plan and is our ambition appropriate for the world we now live in? And does it need to be revisited and renewed as a minimum to really ask the questions? There are opportunities in a COVID world, in a post-COVID world, as well as threats. And are we really aligned to those? And are we, making it easy for people to choose us in the end? And are we now a school that in this so-called new world is going to be equally attractive? And so that's something I want to dwell on a little bit. And last but certainly not least, how to measure reputation. Now, I'm going to give you a quick and dirty self-assessment today for your school's reputation, which is quite subjective given you don't represent the whole school in a sampling sense. But take you through a tool that we use with so many schools called the Reputation Assessor, and give you a taste of what a benchmarking and assessment of reputation should look like, and particularly the headings or the areas, the components that we would say are relevant to measuring reputation. And that's the $64,000 question: is what is your reputation? And most schools that I work with for the first time have never measured reputation. As close as they tend to get is maybe looking at the Net Promoter Score, the NPS as it's known, but a holistic measurement of reputation as a baseline and then tracking that is a whole new game for so many schools. Yet it seems such a critical exercise. Many schools measure satisfaction, for example. I regard that as relatively insignificant compared to measuring reputation. So I'll have something to say about that and give you a little bit of a chance to do a self-assessment, and so you won't have to listen to me for a whole hour. So let's take a look if we can launch into our first area, which is really, getting a sense of reputation management in our times today and why it would be important and what's it all about. Well, the landscape for schools, something I'm always interested in, but it's become particularly interesting, I think, in the last 12 months. And I've just tried to summarize for you here 5 points that I would want you to take with you in your thinking about, you're looking to respond to the context you face. Now, it has many local factors in different countries around the world, but broadly speaking, I find these are 5 quite consistent themes, and I think mindsets that would be helpful for you in seeking to, respond appropriately to your stakeholders. The first of those is that, and this isn't a COVID phenomenon, but it certainly has been building for some time. I think parents and to some extent students really think and act like investors. And for many years, people said, well, they're really consumers. Well, they are, but it's a very different sector than going and buying a fridge or going and buying a car. This is an investment in their children from which they look to measure and expect short-term and long-term benefits. Short-term, are they happy and contented to go to school? Do I see new skills at the dining table of an evening? Long-term, will you have them advantage to get into a top university? And will they have the skills to progress successfully in that university? So the idea of a ROI, return on investment, whilst it sounds crude, is very much the mindset of many of our international school parents now. And I think it probably always was for many, they now are saying, not, is it a good school? Show me why it's a good school for my child, which takes me to that 4th point. So just jumping down there, it's about the benefits and values that the value we can convey to parents that our school offers. Now, that's not a simple exercise, and it means you need to understand the reputation of your school and what, through the eyes of stakeholders, are seen to be the benefits and values, not what you see as the benefits. So fitting into this psychology of investors, where there's really if you think about you and I making an investment, in the US stock market, and we probably all wish we did that a year ago, we are looking at a situation where pre-investment, people are saying, give me a good reason to choose you. And that reason has to be informed by trust and confidence. They need to have trust and confidence. Reputation is a key asset to provide that. So that's the sort of pre-investor phase. And then, of course, once they enroll with us, they become investors as such. And you and I know that when you've made an investment in something, you're pretty keen to see how it's traveling. You're pretty keen to see whether the things you were promised are being delivered. And you're very keen to see some of those manifest in growth. Now, in this case, it's growth in the child. So there's sort of, I guess, incumbent on schools to describe, after parents have invested, what it is that they're seeing in their child. And so you will see parents go to look, in a yearbook, for example, at something about their child rather than the school. So we see that investor psychology carried through. And this is what we call retention in our company. It's, progression and retention. So are we providing the investor with good information that says you are getting what we promised and hopefully more? And then, of course, there's a post-investment. So when they've graduated and they've, if you like, exhausted their funds and now they're getting back, the finished product, so to speak, the graduate student, where are the benefits post-school? Entry to university, of course, entry to the workplace, progression through university, life skills, All of the things that we would want to point to and say, we had a role in that. There was things at the school that long-term are of benefit. So there's that psychology. I just want to highlight that. And, you know, all of this, of course, leads us to say that a concept like reputation is very relevant. But even if we don't think about reputation, I think very important to understand the mindset, to understand parents. And they're all different, of course, but broadly speaking, these are the traits that I see. Second one is that, and it's some repetition, they seek value, they seek differentiation, and they seek customization. So parents are asking many questions about schools, but they're going to increasingly ask, what's special about your school? What's distinctive? How are you going to provide for my child who has particular interest in A, B, and C? So we've been on that journey for some time, as you know. It's becoming more acute, I think, out of the COVID experience. Why? Because parents have got closer to the scene and can ask questions now, I think, in a way that perhaps they were previously less informed about. So, you know, knowledge is a dangerous thing. I think parents have more knowledge now, and I say that in a way that means that we've got to step up to the plate and be more explicit about why this is the right school for that child. And that's challenging. Student-parent expectations have always been different, but they continue to diverge. In many schools that I'm working with, the markets... Sorry? Are we right? Yeah. At many schools I work with, the audience is shifting, and I'm not sure about yours, but many in Asia are now looking more locally. So there's less expatriates and repatriates. And so this is an interesting challenge for us to say, for whom are we dealing with, and for whom do we need a reputation with, and what are going to be the drivers in their mind of success for the school? And last but not least, down the bottom, folks, well, the 21st century has been an interesting one. 2020 will be remembered. But from a parent point of view, one of the key things is, well, we've all been through this together. Take me to a better place. Give me some optimism. Give me a sense that the school is on the move and that the school has 21st century, and perhaps I should have put in there 22nd century ambition as well. So what's done is done, but parents are gravitating towards schools that are moving, have scenarios that are futures-based, are thinking about doing things differently, recognizing that some things shouldn't change, but recognizing that some things are changing. So that's an important, I think, mindset amongst parents that, you know, you need to demonstrate that, well, we're in a good place and we've been going well and COVID came along. What's the next big thing for the school? May not do it, but the idea of scenarios that mean we are looking and thinking about things differently. For example, interdisciplinary teaching. There's a whole range of things that have started in our sector, but nobody, or very few schools have really made a name, a reputation for something like that. It's in their portfolio, but it's a bit like STEM, where we're doing a bit of that. But this is a chance to really, I think, be more filtered and more apex driven in our thinking about our name and acclaim. And, you know, this is an exciting and challenging time, but in some respects, it's removed some of the shackles. So many schools travel along very comfortably, but we've had a good shake-up. So that said, can I take you to my observations about, I guess, the response of schools? And, you know, I work in this space every day, so maybe I am a little bit too critical at times about it, but we are getting better. That's the first thing. And if you look at back in 20 years, when I started my consulting practice in this space, schools have come a long way, are much better communicators, focus much more on planning, focus much more on defined strengths and building flagships. But still, if we look across, you know, so many country markets, the differentiation between schools, the differences is still relatively weak and indistinct, and still many read the same. They're not the same because when you walk in the gates, you see the differences. We're having trouble conveying that externally. We're having trouble building a reputation for the things we'd like. And often reputation lags the reality. In other words, we've got a name that's somewhat not the school we are today. So we've got more work to do in terms of being able, if you like, to be distinctive and authentic. And authenticity is a very important word as we go forward. Is it going to be something, for example, we could say we have an authentic pedagogy in our school? Mightn't be unique, but it's authentic to our context. And some of these sorts of, I guess, positioning concepts need to start to come to the fore. We need to get away from saying, here's a long list of reasons you should choose us. We're good at all of these things. Take your pick. That doesn't cut it in a contemporary context. Most schools, if you look around the world, forgetting about just international schools for a moment, those that are best known tend to come back to their location, their place, or how old they are. And universities are exactly the same as that in many respects. So if you think of a university in Boston, you think they're all good because it's in Boston. If you think of, a British independent school located in Cambridge, you'd have to be good if it's located there. So these are advantages for some schools, but what I'm suggesting here is there are many different and many alternate ways for schools to be different and to be, can I say, famous, that don't mean that you have to have a certain location or a certain age or vintage for your school. So many of the differences in schools are internal in schools, but don't find their way out onto the streets. I also see that schools are challenged by having long-term futures, and Ed and all of those present today will know that one of the challenges in our international school scene is the changeover of directors and heads, and the continuity to say in 10 years' time, we're going to be famous for this. And then resourcing that and really, I guess, being almost ruthless in the way we move towards that is a rare thing. So this is another challenge for us to build a name in something. If you look around the great companies of the world, it's been done not only over time, but it's been done in a very dedicated fashion. They don't move the ground much. They stick with their story. They play to their strengths. And in schools, we tend to jump around a bit. So this is another challenge that we face, to build a reputation for something specific that is widespread amongst the community. And last but not least, most schools, I think, try to do too much. They try to be too inclusive in saying what they wish to be known for, what they're focusing on. They tend to just pile on, if you like, new initiatives. Now, that's admirable in the sense that we're trying to be all things to all people, but in a reputational point of view, and even from a practical point of view, and I guess a well-being point of view, it's much better to start saying, well, yes, we do many things, but if you want A, B, and C, this is your school. So we tend to try and start thinking about creating a bit of an apex in terms of, I guess, the way that we convey ourselves and the way that we practice. So it's very difficult to be good at all things. So many schools, for example, now will say to me, oh, EAL, we're strong in that area, but did you intend to be? No, but people just came to us with that, and all of a sudden we're in a cul-de-sac where we become known for that. That's very different than planning to be known for that and saying that's what we really want to be known for. So one of the things about, I suppose, is being able to decide what you will be, but equally what you will not be. And that's, sitting on the fence has been the sort of mantra in schools. And I think the COVID world's really asking us to put our hand up and say, hey, we do many things, but this is our specialisation or our flagship. So there's some of, I guess, my observations, what I'm seeing. Picture says 1,000 words, and I've used this one before, but I'll use it again because it's more fashionable than ever now, I think. We can be more certain now, it's been said many, many times by many, many experts that, the world's a changing place. We have a chance to make it. And I think again here, I guess I'd emphasize we can be a reputation maker or a reputation taker. What would be the light on the hill in 10 years for our school? We may not get to that light, but if there is no light on the hill, it's a weakness in our outlook. And so I think it's a very exciting time for schools and certainly many schools. It took a 100-day plan to get through the last year and early this year. But look at a 10-year scenario. What might be some possibilities, and what some things you can work to in 6 months in a planning exercise. Some things take 5, 6 years. Now, that challenges our continuity. But if we want to have distinctive, authentic reputations, there's got to be some sustainability and long-term in our thinking. So a few reflections from me, and I don't sit here proposing to be a COVID futurist, but from where I sit, these are sort of 5 things that I would say are going to be important for school leaders and important for success, both in an educational sense and a market sense in schools going forward. Actions and strategies grounded in robust evidence. The idea of being evidence-based in your strategy is something that I live every day. And I think schools are moving to that way of thinking, but becoming more important. Now, why? We can't do more. We need to know what are the things that matter most. What are the actions and strategies that are going to disproportionately reward us as a school? And sometimes there's a tendency to assume they all equally do. Well, they don't. You'll find, for example, when you look at school choice, the motivating factors to parents are usually 2 or 3 things, not 20 or 30. So we're being moved, and it's a challenge, and universities have done this, and schools tend to follow universities, and I work with universities as well in our practice, that evidence-based direction setting is going to be more important. Yes, it takes a little time. It can cost a few dollars if you do it externally, but very important to see that you are aligned with stakeholders. And I mean stakeholders in the broadest sense, from prospective parents through to alumni, because building a name and a claim does rely on knowing your starting position, does rely on being aligned, and does rely on using the insights you gain from people, from stakeholders, to plan not only now, but the next 10 years. And the great companies of the world do this very well, and schools still catching up with it. Second, build on critical strengths and defend your weakness. You can't be good at everything. Every school has weaknesses, and we'll carry those. But find out the critical strengths, the ones that matter most to people, and the critical weaknesses, the ones that matter most to people. And they're really the ones to focus on. So you don't have to create the new next big thing to be successful in a post-COVID world, but you do need to have flagships and specializations, which may be able to be things you already have, but you can just be built on, augmented, so to speak. Performance monitoring, I think, all of us would say, oh no, not more monitoring, not more performance measures, but I think moving the needle towards what is most important to stakeholders and being able to clearly show and prove that the school is focused on those things, making progress on those things, and the school more generally is on the move to a better place. Don't assume people get that. The intelligence we gather should be purposeful in that sense, along those lines. And monitoring and benchmarking is all very in vogue, but from what to what? And what are we trying to show? So be very clear in your objectives in terms of what's worth measuring, what's worth monitoring, and what are we going to use that information for, and how are we going to apply it? Parent choice, I think, my sense is, and I've done quite a few projects in recent months on choice for schools, that it's moved, it's certainly been a bit of a shock. It's moved more towards trust and confidence. It always was there, but people are risk averse. People want comfort in the community in which they place their children. They are looking for trusted, safe pairs of hands, as you and I are in every other walk of life. So why would it be different in schools? So your task is to convey that your people know what you're doing, i.e. staff, and that they should have confidence that this school has got evidence base, does know where it's going, it's heading in the right directions, it's thinking of new initiatives, it's building on its successes, and it's going to be a good thing for students to have on their resume, their CV. And that's just one way of looking at it, the value of the school. So reputation is a great asset, because people can say, well, your school is on the move. In 20 years, I'll bet it's going to be an even better school than now, and it's on my resume. Now, this is a different way of looking at it, but we have, it's incumbent on it. We have a responsibility to think that way, even in terms of the value of our credential of what we offer as a school, just as universities do. And last but not least, I just mentioned that parents want more evidence that is authentic about your school's activities, not just generic results. IB scores, of course, mean a lot to many parents, but there are other indicators you can imbue into your parent body in terms of how they can view progress and support. So think about factual proof and evidence that you are doing the things that you say you do, and explaining the benefits, what I call the so what of those particular things. Okay, a little bit about reputation. Two ways of looking at it. One, reputation defined is a collective representation of what you've been doing. And ultimately, people thrash that around and say, well, I'm getting a general picture of this school, and this is how I describe the reputation. So the message there is reputations are not built overnight. You can market overnight, but reputations don't develop. They develop over aggregated activity over time. So this is one of the things that challenges people about reputation. It's not an overnight success. It takes time, but its rewards are numerous. Lower marketing costs, less time trying to convince people about the school, attracting high quality staff, clarity in the market about what you are and what you're not. So it has very deep and long-term rewards. Second definition of reputation I've mentioned here, and this is quite a telling one. Reputation is more than marketing. Marketing is one very important component of reputation. It's what we say about ourselves, but ultimately it's what other people will say about us that is reputation. What other people will say about us is generally not very influenced by what we say. It's influenced by what we do. So marketing a school can move the way people see it, and people get very excited about brand, but it's very overrated, to be quite honest. Reputation is the concept to work with, and the way that's built is, yes, we need to convey and communicate what we're doing, absolutely, in a marketing sense, but it must be something that is marketable, and it must be something that is going to influence the opinion people have when we actually do it. It won't be done just by saying it. So it does require, as I said right at the beginning, this connection between strategic thinking and operational action. And not many concepts do that. So it gives us a very overarching frame. I was working with a school recently in Europe, one of my client schools. They actually renamed their strategic plan and their marketing plan a reputation plan. And it's all coming under that one umbrella. And that sometimes it helps schools be able to understand that really, why are we doing a strategic plan? Well, we have to, and CIS might tell us that we need to, and NEAC say the same. But you should be doing a planning exercise to improve the reputation of the school. That's KPI number one, in my view. A little bit more about reputation there, just some points there. I won't dwell on those too much, but fundamentally, reputation is about intrinsic quality. You can't fake it. Not in the school sector anyway. You can talk about a school being great, but until people have that experience and that becomes the word on the street, the referral, it's really not going to be a very strong or deliberate name that you'll build. So the intrinsic qualities of school, what's going to be the qualities that will hold you in good stead? Is it staff development? Is it curriculum development? Is it external connections? What is it going to be? And if you think about schools, it goes without saying that teaching, learning, curriculum are the fundamental qualities intrinsically in a school. But how we show that we are doing exceptionally well in those, how we're progressing those, the benefits of those is quite a subtle exercise. Reputation's net image. Ask 50 parents on Monday, write down one word to describe the school. Ask 50 students, if you like. What's the net image? What was the most common words that came up? And we call this the sort of overall attractiveness. If you get 50 different words, they might all be good words. You've got an interesting reputation. It's all over the place. The idea is that you would see 2 or 3 words come up commonly and consistently. By the way, those words should be reflected in your vision and mission statements. They should be close to that. So theoretically, you should be able to walk through a school and then go and say, I'm going to write the vision or the mission of this school from what I've seen and be able to compare it with reality. But you should be working in reputation towards getting a consistent, singular image. That's the goal. So when you think of Nike, you think of Google, you think of some of these companies, Apple, whether we like them or whether we don't like them, they have very strong identities that usually come back to a couple of words, whether it's creativity or whatever. So that's the secret of success in reputation terms. Reputation is quite intangible too. So much of the world is based on intangible assets. It's your number one asset, yet it's not something you can grab. It's made up of a number of components. And as I said, those components are what you do and what you say. So what do parents say is important about reputation? What do they judge to be a good reputation? And there's just some examples for you where the best students go. Often that can be, self-fulfilling. The best students go here, so those schools get the best results. Not very fair, but for many parents, that's a simple indicator. So we've got some, thinking to do about how we demonstrate the quality of our students and the quality of our staff in that sense. The best students would want to go with the best staff is. So that's an interesting perspective. For others, it's more pragmatic. Pass the grandmother or neighbour test. You lean over the fence and say, what's the best school to go to around here? It has a public name, it's known, and it's known for something that's of value. That's another way that parents tend to do it. For others, again, if it's hard to get into, entry is difficult, it's good. And we see that certainly in the university sector, demand, if there's a long queue outside a restaurant, we think it must be pretty good, correct? And so that's another perspective. I'm just canvassing these, and it'd be interesting for you to find out in your school, what are the evaluators of reputation? What are the top 2 things people think about when they say, well, is it a good school or a bad school? What are the pillars that are in their mind? And that's a very important exercise. The media profile for other parents, it's just, the school that you hear a lot about in the news. and for others again, and this one is rising up in importance. Is it excellent at something? Is it truly exceptional at something? Does it have a flagship out of which a number of other strengths can flow? And if you like, the apex that I spoke about earlier. So, you know, in today's world, it's a very crowded market now. I'm working with schools that have many seemingly look-alike competitors. So, you know, it's taken us back to say, well, we're a good school, nothing's changed, but we're now seen to be in the pack. Do we need a flagship? And this is something that's become increasingly important in parent psychology. Is there something that stands you apart from the pack that helps me make the choice as a parent? How to build and manage reputation. Well, let's have a look at some of my wisdom here, if I may. And look, in terms of this topic, building and managing reputation, start with the end in mind. Now, we all have been, I think, through visioning exercises and been to those lofty sort of strategic planning workshops that people like I tend to run. But I always say to my schools, start with the end in mind. How would you like to be known 5, 10, even 20 years from now? If we can get some consensus on that, you've got the basis for your vision, you've got the basis for resource allocation, you've got the basis for thinking about everything within that filter and being able to really embark on things that support that target. And that's I think a very important thing. If you don't know what reputation you want, there's not much hope that stakeholders are going to know. So being bold enough to define and say, look, we're not there yet, but here's the way we want to be known in 5 to 10 years. Aspirational, very unifying, both inside the school and outside. Of course, there's some robust, work to be done to get to that. But that is, I think, one of the challenges for schools is having some glue that binds. Vision statements don't bind staff very well, or even communities. I haven't met many parents who said, oh, I read the mission statement, that's why I enrolled. They don't hurt, but we need to be, I think, more definitive about reputation as being a statement in itself about where we're going. So reputation, three points here about, I guess, building and managing reputation I'd like to make today. One is that you're looking for a cogent and compelling reason to choose your school over others. Cogent meaning a package of reasons that all fit together, what I call a golden thread. And compelling means, well, you can have many reasons to choose your school, but if it's not compelling, not important, then we're not going to go far. The second point I'd make is that your goal in reputation building is to occupy a distinctive mind in people's, a distinctive place in people's mind. Excuse me. And really that means that, when they think X, they think you. How close to that are you in your community? How close to developing that are you? And what would people say at the end of the day is your best known attribute, where they think you're going, what they think you clearly are now. Thirdly, I'm making the point that if you look at the experience in other sectors about building reputation, they move close to almost owning a word or concept. In other words, they become synonymous with a particular word or concept. Now, that's not an easy thing to do in the school sector because we have many different students and we have many different activities. However, thinking again about being able to make it easy for people to remember us in terms of a word or a theme that might overarch. So, something that's very important to everybody. Now, I'll just give you one example, sustainability. Now, that's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's just one example of where you could point to activities across the school that relate to that and provide, some connection. Global citizenship is another one that people use. So see if we can think, I guess more precisely about where the end is. We don't want 10 ends in mind. We want to try and say, as far as possible, we'd like to be synonymous with this concept or this word in the future. Many people reduce that to a tagline, which is like an advertising slogan. That's helpful, but that doesn't very often become the reputation of the school. But again, what we're trying to do here is saying the multitude of things that happen in schools, is it any wonder the public has a sort of, a view about it? So, it's a good school, but I really can't tell you why. So this is, I guess, part of reputation management. It's a discipline in thinking about really what will highlight us. We'll be good at many things, but what will be our banner, our flag waver, if you will. So Two quick points here, folks. To build reputation, it's simple but difficult, I suppose. And reputations come from two sources, really. For those that go to the school, including staff, parents and students, the direct experience is the reputation builder. You'll find it very difficult to say, you've been at our school for 5 years, and I know you think this about it, but you actually got it wrong. This is the sort of school it is. People will rely on their experience, and it's very hard to shift that view. If you've had a discussion with a parent about trying to say, well, we're going to get better and we're going to change this, their experience becomes their reality in terms of their judgment about the reputation of the school. In other words, what they would say to other people. So that brings us back to that earlier definition of reputation. You're going to find that reputation is best built by doing and then saying, not in the other way around. The direct experience is the most powerful one, because those with the strongest views of schools will be staff, parents and students that you've got. Don't underestimate staff. They should be your number one advocate. And I know I've been around teaching long enough and been a teacher myself to know that's not always the case. But what are we doing to build connection to that long-term ambition, trajectory, reputation we're looking to build? People need that to be part of something that's going to be big. And I think, we're probably a bit loose on that in international schools. For the external community, those are the uninitiated that never come to the school, communication information counts more. For example, with alumni, they've been to the school, but they've left. Are you going to update their view on the school? What's the school doing now? What's the next big thing at the school? How is the school seeing the benefits through its university graduates who went to the school? So what you can convey to audiences that are, if you like, are uninitiated at the school is going to be very critical to the view that they hold of the school. Of course, if they meet people that had a direct experience, they're going to be influenced significantly by that. But if you want people in the community that, though they don't go to the school, are still important to you in terms of the opinion they have about the school, you need a dedicated communication approach to that. So that's how reputations form. And often you'll find a school that is doing great things, and parents and staff will think it's great. And you go to the outside community and they've either never heard of it or don't think it's very good at all because we're weak on this bit. You'll see other schools again that are saying a lot about how good they are, but actually you'll find the view of parents is below that because the direct experience is not up to match. It has to be both, folks. To get an authentic, genuine reputation, it's got to be a holistic exercise. So 5 steps to build reputation. I'm thinking again about the COVID world. Here I sort of created this, on one of those days last year when, we were still desk-based, but really desk-based and home-based. And I think just thinking about the practical steps you can take in your schools. Vision. Well, it sounds like a prosaic exercise to write a vision. Revisit it. Ask questions about its clarity. Is it distinctive to your parents and your community and compared to other schools? Does it have real meaning? Can people form a view out of your vision as to what this school would look like when that vision is achieved? Is it too ambiguous? Is it too woolly? Is it too cloudy? Consider upgrading the ambition. Why not? Set the bar. We've come through this together. We've done it well. In the next 10 years, you've got this, or next 5 years, you've got this to look forward to. We have big plans at our school. So vision renewal, and of course, accompanied by the mission, the vision being what we want to be known for, which is as good as your statement of reputation. Your mission is how you will get there. I encourage schools to have a third component in their core statements. So vision, mission, and graduate qualities. Now, many of your IB schools have the learner profile. However, formalizing possibly that and some other skill components into a statement saying, this is what our graduates will look like. This is what you can expect to see at the dinner table by the end of Year 12, is a really interesting way of defining the benefits, the qualities, the strengths of the schools. And vision and mission statements are mostly for internal consumption, to be honest. Not many parents will say, show me the vision statement, and then I'll decide. If you can show them the school, meet some of the senior students, some of the junior students, show them the graduate qualities, explain to them how across the sections of the school, these skills will be seamlessly and in a dedicated way developed, and the benefits that they have had for students at the school and as graduates. It's a very compelling way of getting an image, a picture in the parents' minds about what this school is all about. So that can be a very useful one to build reputation, or at least set the scene for a reputation aspiration to be known. Bare necessities, in terms of what we say about our schools and what we do, as I said earlier, we do a tremendous amount. I think this next year is going to make us look back at sticking to the knitting a bit. I talk about narrow and deep. Do more of what is most important to parents. We are getting overwhelmed by adding things on. We've got to take a step back and saying, well, we're doing 100 things. They're all important. But if parents were asked the question, if we were to do more of 3 things in our school, just 3 things, what would they be? It could be a very interesting exercise to allow you to filter and to shorten meetings in schools about what really matters. And so I use the term bare necessities as an interesting way of thinking about how we really not only move forward as a school, but particularly in the context of reputation, how we have narrow but deep activity, which means we can have less to say, but more to say about, more depth to say about those things. If you look at the great companies of the world, they don't say there's 20 reasons to pick us. They have 1 or 2 attributes, and there's some reason for that. People don't remember a whole range of things, 1, and 2, there's a sense that you water down. If you say, well, we're good at 25 different things, there's a sense that that can't be credible. Organisational structure, less to say about that. I think there's some issues for schools around whether their structures are suitable going forward. And I've talked a lot about flagships already. Think about a flagship that you would take some time to build. I suggest 3 in this particular point. You might have strengths at the subject level or a cognate cluster of subjects. You might have strengths in terms of what I call a theme. So interdisciplinary teaching, for example, is something that could be across the whole school. And thirdly, what I call a golden thread, something that's relevant to all students and parents, something like sustainability. So specialisation and flagships can come in different forms. I tend to work with schools in those 3 areas. But at the end of the day, it's not that, we've got a new sports hall. That's not a flagship. That's a place where a flagship could develop in terms of a sports academy. So we need to think about, something that has some depth and some real, authenticity to it, and is not something that's, just sort of a gimmick, so to speak. So 3 pillars to create reputation, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through what I have to say. So stay with me. This is about as close to maths as I get. I'm not a terrible maths student, but I do know this, that there are 3 pillars to create reputation, and those 3 pillars have to be worked on concurrently for people to really build reputation. And the first is credentials. You need to have something of substance. Perceptions, you need to be able to get the message out about those credentials to build perception. And third but not least, last but not least, we need to have a very important sense that we're on the move. Reputations of so many of the great companies aren't about what they're at now, it's where they're going. Have a look at Tesla, for example, making a handful of cars, but changing, in terms of the trajectory of what people think about cars, have had a significant impact. So we are going to a better place is really the thing here. And so those are the 3 areas to work on. The numbers 1 to 4, 1 being, if you like, the weakest reputation, because it's mostly about perception, not much credential, and 4 being the sweet spot between the 3. Strong credentials, we're getting the word out there in perception, and we're giving a sense that we're going to a more desired place. That's the science of my thinking there. This slide I won't say much about. It's a range of things that strategies I've seen work in schools that fast track reputation. Some will work for you, some will not, but I'm just leaving them and tabling today as options for you. And it needs to be an exercise which is both external and internal. In other words, we need to have things happening externally and internally generally to really strongly fast track a reputation. But building a reputation plan would revisit many of those sorts of areas and ask which of these can apply in your school. Giving you a framework here that doesn't have anything populated, and there's a good reason for that, it's a takeaway for you. Going from left to right, it's a framework I use with schools to build reputation, but also to build marketing. And what that means is that there's a clear linear from left to right about what we are going to be known for. Our vision statement sets us up for that, hopefully, in terms of a clear and compelling and cogent identity. Then the marketers get hold of it, and they should be creating marketing messages that fall out of that identity, which is really a reputation statement. So what are going to be the things we can say out of the statement that we've espoused is our reputation aspiration? What are the messages that fall out of that? What are the things that are marketable within that? Then importantly, third column, what are the benefits? So this is the what to market. This is the so what. Why is this a valuable message? Small class sizes, for example. Okay, most of us would know there's some benefit in that, but we need to spell it out. Customized learning, more individual attention, whatever it may be. So this needs to be populated as well. Then to make this even deeper, go looking for evidence around the school that supports these messages, supports the benefits. Where would a parent look for that in your school? Where would I find it as a visitor to your school? So that's the sort of thinking. We get a very linear flow. This is what I meant by narrow and deep. Marketing messages no more than about 4, but depth within each. So what's the wash up of something like this? Well, it's this. You should over time become more known for less. You should over time become known for the things that are in this. You might be known for other things as well, but you're trying to make inroads into a singular reputation or identity. Very similar term, but reputation is a more holistic one. So I'd like you to think about applying that framework. Good one for managers to have a go at individually. And then as a starting point, maybe to take staff through in a PD session, not so much the marketing messages, but what's the benefit of what we do? Where would I go in the school to find this evidence? Teachers are very good at providing population for that particular column. So a little bit about good reputation. I'll just make 2 points here. It's good for many things. The first of them is parent choice. You do any assessment of parent choice and you'll see factors about reputation near the top. Most parents say, well, reputation of the school, how do I judge it? I look at the quality of materials that's going in. Tell me about your teaching staff. Tell me about your learning environment. Tell me about the curriculum you're running. Tell me about past results. Tell me about current results, a whole range of things. Most parents are asking those questions because they're trying to assess the quality of what's going in to get a sense of the quality that's going to come out. So you need substance in your materials. Just saying, oh, we have good teaching staff. Well, what school wouldn't say that? What's the staff journey look like in your school? What do you do in terms of recruitment, induction? How do we know they're a good fit with your school? What are the professional development programs? Who's doing a master's? How are they applying it in action research in the school? And so on and so on. So it's really a question of not just putting the headline, it's putting the detail. Consistency is an Achilles heel for schools. I hear parents say, oh, it was a great school in year 4. Then I'll come back 2 years later. Oh, my daughter's in year 6 now. Don't like the school at all. So we've got to provide consistency, not only in what we do, but what we say, which is reputation across the school. And this gets very tricky when we break schools into pastoral units, year level sections, sub schools, and so forth. But one of the key things about choice is that consistency equals trust and confidence. You need to work towards, as far as possible, a consistent view of your school out there. And that can only be done by a serious and really powerful approach to reputation, not a superficial one. Let's create a tagline. That is not reputation management. I've talked about trust and confidence before, and those are the underlying unwritten reasons why people select schools. That's why the oldest schools, the ones in the best location, continue to often do the best. Trusted, not necessarily the best, same with universities. Your best ranked universities in the world are often some of the worst ranked in terms of teaching and learning. But people choose them because they trust that those qualifications will carry into the labour market. Very interesting phenomenon. So one of the things that you can be thinking about when you go back to work on Monday, or if you sit down and write a reputation plan later today, is just 3 things, and that I tend to remind schools to think about when they're plotting their future reputation, when they're thinking about how we're going to get beyond our current reputation after we measure it. 3 things that I would ask you to think about. One is innovation. What's the appetite for innovation? Do we do things the old way, or do we need to break out and have something quite different and fresh in our school? So the innovation spectrum, as I call it, is one way of considering how we move our reputation forward. What is going to be needed? More of the same or something really left field? Concentration is the second one. And that can really mean a couple of things, but I'd like today for it to mean that are we looking at particular audiences where we have a terrible reputation? Might be the local community. It might be students love us, but parents don't seem to. So which audiences are going to concentrate most on, which stakeholders for reputation? It might be all of them. But sometimes after you've done an initial assessment, schools that do this with me with a reputation assessor find that our reputation depends on who you talk to. It's really good in some pockets, and other pockets of stakeholders it's not. So that's a second one to have a think about. And the third one is endurance. We're going to build this reputation. It's going to take time, but do we need some short-term hits? Some things that really, because we have an enrollment challenge or retention challenge, or there's a new competitor opening down the road. Got a school at the moment I'm working with in Morocco, which is exactly that challenge. And thinking about whether we need mostly long-term development of our reputation, what things that will impact long-term, or do we need some short-term hits as well? We need some short-term hits. We've got to think about some intensive activity that might really move reputation. It might be about communication. It might be about something we're not doing in the school or not doing well. So there's three filters I get people to think about. Now, can I take you to a quick and dirty exercise, as I call it, how to measure reputation? We've developed a tool 10 years ago now called the Reputation Assessor. Some of the schools present, I think, have been through it. Many others around the world are going through it as we speak. Anyway, it's got 8 elements to it about reputation. And the idea of that is that schools will be measuring and finding a way to respond to indicators that sit within each of these 8 areas. Now, it's a benchmarking and a measurement exercise. The idea is that we can talk about reputation all day, but if you don't know your starting point of reputation, it's very hard to plan where to next. So it creates a baseline. It creates a benchmark because you get compared to other schools in our database that have been through this, over 100 of them around the world. And it also gives us 8 sub-definitions of what does reputation really look like in terms of the building blocks. What are the components of it, when we get away from the big concept that sit within it that we should be really focusing our attention on. And my definition of this is, as I say, to have 8 areas. And there they are. I'll just give you a moment to look through those 8 aspects of reputation that we can measure. And we're going to actually do a quick self-assessment with you in about 2 minutes. So what I would like to do now is pause for fresh air, and I'm going to get each of the participants today, and it's a very subjective exercise, I appreciate that, but you would normally go back and have a measurement in your school by management, staff, parents, possibly some senior students, and possibly others such as inquirers or decliners, or possibly alumni. And the idea is to get a rounded view of perception of reputation across these 8 areas. And those 8 areas are there. I would like you just to take a couple of minutes, if I may, and I know this is a very short time frame for it, but 2 things to do down the bottom. Just, at the stroke of a pen, rate your school on a 1 to 6 against each of the 8 components of the reputation assessor, 6 being the best. So, I will never know if you're a 1 or if you're a 6, but just give yourself a score, working down those and thinking about evidence that you would have to support your rating. Now, I won't be in today's time frame asking you for that evidence, but if you took this as an exercise back to school, and the reputation assessor tool does is it asks for evidence against that. So if you say to me, for example, I think in our school we have a very clear position. Our identity is clear. People know what we're about. If you say we're a 6 about that, what would be in your mind the strongest bit of evidence to support that? It might be that people quote the vision every day, or it might be that you get that feedback in inquiry consistently, or it's come through in other measurement devices. Similarly for number 2, the performance of the school. Is there good, deep evidence that the school is performing well? Not just in terms of IB scores, but anything else. So, what body of evidence do you have? The reason I'm asking you to think about number 2, as well as just quickly give a score, is that ultimately you can build a repository of evidence that you can convey to the community about your reputation. That's the whole point of it, building the narrative, building proof points that don't just believe that we're a good school because that's what we, need to market. There's clear evidence using a structure like this that it's in fact the case. It's true. So can I just stop for a couple of minutes, Ed and Christine? Let's give everybody a chance just to in their own, piece of paper back at home, just work through that really quickly in 2 or 3 minutes, giving yourself a 1 to 6 score. Thanks. Okay, now I would imagine that you've been able to allocate a number next to each of those 8, and it's very subjective, as I say, and that the importance of the score is not the issue in this exercise, but to start getting us thinking about where we might think we stand in terms of reputation. Of course, the value of this tool is in asking others, but it does give some shape, I hope, and some definition to what we mean by reputation in terms of the components of it. No school is going to be good in all of these. The key is, where are we good, and what can we build on that we think we need to build on to give us a strong, robust reputation. So building the evidence is really the sort of second column as per that second question. Now, just in terms of, I suppose, practically applying something like this, one place to start in a further discussion back in your school is looking at the critical strengths, the areas that you've managed to measure, or score a 5 or 6 in, which is essentially, areas of strength. How do we extend and capitalize on these? What's the proof that we have? So they're our critical strengths. So that's sort of number 1 in terms of an area to focus on as an output from that exercise. The second one is critical weaknesses. Here we're looking at anywhere where you might have allocated a 1 or a 2, or possibly even a 3. Are these going to hurt us? Do they impact significantly on our reputation? And looking at it in a reputation context, we're looking to mitigate our weaknesses and defend those that are particularly where we're very vulnerable. So reputation makes us think about building critical strengths. It makes us think about addressing critical weaknesses. And of course, then the magical third question is, what would others say about your school if faced with a similar reputation perception? So this is what I find for schools, a fundamental starting place to get reputation as a concept on the management table, on the board table, and have staff see the connection. One of the beauties about reputation is that if you talk to staff about reputation, their eyes will pick up. They'll put their phones down and they will be listening because they're interested in their reputation, but they also understand the critical role that they play in reputation. Whereas with marketing, it's somewhat a discrete activity. So if the marketer gets up and talks to teaching faculty, you'll tend to see them looking less comfortable or even less interested. So it's a very inclusive concept. And I guess the beauty, the potential of this tool is that you can use it as a way to define reputation in your school. These are the 8 areas that we're looking to build strength in, as a way to measure where we're at and improve over time, and also to benchmark. And, at the end of the day, if you're going to get a concept moving in a school, you need a tool and you need a mechanism to do it. And this is not just another measure. It can really, in my experience, supersede so many other measurements, such as satisfaction measures and the like. And within those 8 areas, by the way, there are multiple tools. So there are indicators of excellence. There's about 40 indicators all up within those 8 areas. So it's quite succinct, but that's a starting point to apply, I hope, some of what I've been saying today for your own reputation. And fundamentally, I'm putting a new concept, a new lens, a new set of glasses, if you like, on a whole range of things in our very difficult environment that we face and saying, here's a concept that can help you organize your way forward. It's called reputation and reputation management. And I've just, on our website, there are a range of free resources, and I write and so on about reputation and speak about it. And also, of course, the reputation assessor tool. I put the link there, which is on our website if you're interested in taking a look at that. But these are free resources, number one. Number two, if they're of interest, please email me. Word of mouth, I use it a couple of times today. It's not the same as reputation, but you and I know that it's what people take with them as a point, as referral. So it's very close to the same meaning. And so all of us, I think, know that concept probably better than reputation. And for the sake of today, you can substitute it. So I wrote a paper about building word of mouth, because if you Google word of mouth, you get very little, next to nothing. So I wrote a 30-page paper on it. It's good bedtime reading. And it will give you a sense of the depth that we need to be thinking about. This is not, a simple exercise. Building reputation is serious stuff, but reputation, I go back to what I said earlier, is your number one asset. And this is the time. There's never been a time to focus on reputation now, to bring together so many of the other discrete activities that happen in school, strategic planning, marketing, and so forth. So thanks very much, everybody. And I know that Ed will be able to, I suspect, bring some questions to me and some comments. And, that was quite a white knuckle ride, can I say, for a Saturday morning and a Friday night for others. But the intention was to get you really thinking seriously in that space and to think about a tool to really start you on that journey of dedicated reputation management. Thanks, Ed. Back to you.
Oh, Steve, thank you so very much. A lot to think about, and it's a perspective that sometimes those of us in schools, we don't quite think this way often enough. There are so many other things taking up our time, and our view gets shifted. But this is an important perspective, and one that we need to take into consideration, I think, especially in the year ahead as things start to reopen. And, what do people really think about our school, and what can we do to maintain a reputation, to build on where we were, get back to where we were? So very, very helpful. I didn't see any questions in the chat, so let me take a second. Does anybody have a question they'd like to forward through the chat to ask Steve before we conclude?